In 2003, a new anime for Osamu Tezuka's Astro Boy started airing in Japan. Released alongside it was the Game Boy Advance game that would be known as Astro Boy Omega Factor, and a PS2 game simply called Astro Boy. The PS2 game received mixed reviews, which is pretty on par for a game made by Sonic Team. Omega Factor, on the other hand, was praised for its gameplay and visuals. Both games were produced by Sega, but the GBA game was developed by Treasure, who are known for their 2D side-scrollers such as Gunstar Heroes and Mischief Makers. As I said before, Omega Factor was made alongside the 2003 anime, which was already out in Japan, but the North American release was put on hold since the English dub wasn't going to release for another 6 months in the West. So instead of dusting off their hands and sitting around with their thumbs up their asses, Treasure actually decided to go over the game one more time and change some stuff. They changed things ranging from level layouts to enemy behavior. They even added health bars for bosses. These sons of bitches even made the game harder by making 2 of the already established difficulty settings even more difficult from the Japanese release and adding an easy mode to sort out the Astro Men from the Astro Boys. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a Japanese version of the game anywhere, so I can't show you these differences. The cutting room floor is even still looking for pictures of these differences, so if anyone knows where I can find some, or knows where there's a ROM for the Japanese version, let me know. The game is interesting in terms of story. It's almost like a mashup of different Astro Boy stories, but it also takes bits and pieces from other works by Tezuka, and even has characters who aren't even in the Astro Boy canon. They're pretty prominent too. Characters like Blackjack and Prime Rose, while not Astro Boy characters, have pretty big roles in the story. The story's not the main thing I want to focus on, but I'll be going over some of the story beats as well as some of the little details. The story starts off like every other Astro Boy story. Tenma builds Astro after his son dies, blah blah blah, Dr. O'Shea finds him, blah 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 blah. There's this tutorial level we gotta go through. If you skip it, you don't get Dr. O'Shea and the Omega Factor. Okay, yeah, so the Omega Factor, let's talk about it for a sec. First of all, in the anime, the Omega Factor is a kind of mind control device, so it's completely different this time around. In the game, it's essentially a huge web of all the characters you meet. It's almost like a D&D alignment chart mixed with a political compass with the way the web puts the characters in categories. For instance, you can see how some characters lean more towards justice or braveness. Blackjack is between tenderness and evil here. What the fuck does that even mean? Like, I can understand maybe they were going for a between good and evil, like a kind of gray, morally ambiguous thing, but tenderness might not have been the best word for that. Anyway, after you record someone in the Omega Factor, you get to upgrade a power. You can upgrade your health, punch, laser, machine guns, jets, and sensors. Being able to upgrade whatever you want is cool, and kinda lets you min-max Astro. I always like to upgrade my laser a bunch first so I can just completely destroy some of the early bosses. These upgrades are cool for another reason. They visually change as you upgrade them. For instance, the laser starts off as a thin piss stream, but when fully upgraded, its height is almost as big as Astro. All of Astro's specials or supers have interesting effects. Both the laser and the machine guns destroy most projectiles, making them useful for if you're feeling overwhelmed and need to clear the screen. The machine guns are even more helpful for that, as they also freeze enemies for a short time, giving you a window to attack. The jets also have their own super, and it's useful for hitting enemies that are in a line, but I never really find myself using it that much. Upgrading jets also allows you to dash more. You don't have to wait for one dash to end to go into another one. You can cancel into another dash right away in order to dodge more frequently. Health and punching is pretty self-explanatory. After you punch 3 times, you finish with a kick that sends enemies flying and can even make them knock into each other for some extra damage. You can even break out the kick whenever you want if that's what you're going for, but you won't do as much damage. As for the sensors, I'll go over them when they become relevant. The first stage is pretty straightforward and has a pretty creative enemy with this traffic light guy who hits you with cars. The first boss of the game is this robot spider. It's super weak and isn't very impressive, but then you get to fight Magnemite when you win, which is a pretty cool actual first boss in my opinion. Magnemite is a pretty simple fight, but when I was younger, he kicked my ass so many times I cried. You can only hurt his body, so you either have to get on his back and punch this nipple thing coming out of him, or get him while you're jumping. You can't get too greedy with your hits when you're on his back, as he can easily hit you while you're up there. He also has a laser you have to look out for, so hitting him in the face is practically a no-go. Actually, it's worth noting that he'll only use his laser when you get close to his face. When he's low on health, he'll do a desperation attack over and over again that only gives you a small window of opportunity to hit him after he lands. This boss basically shows you what the rest of the bosses of this game are going to be all about. Tough cookies with lots of different moves, as well as counters that can activate under certain conditions. In Magnemite's case, being too close to his head will activate his laser. The game also doesn't waste your time when you lose. You can jump right back in by mashing the A button. Pressing retry on the pause screen also does this. This doesn't work all the time, however. Some mid-stage bosses will make you restart the whole level over again regardless if you lose or press retry. like Big X in World 2-3. The second world, or stage rather as the game calls it, introduces a new kind of level that will appear throughout the game. It's these auto-scrolling levels where you're flying around and your only attack is your laser and your specials. They get harder as the game progresses, but at this point, they're really nothing to worry about. At the end of this particular level is the artificial sun, which isn't a hard fight once you realize you can just dodge back and forth across the screen. You'll have to pay attention to its tentacles as it gets bigger and spins around, but other than that, it's a pretty easy fight. Once you beat it, you land on this island, and it's another really short level. It consists of 2 bosses and a few characters, meaning it gives you a lot of opportunities to upgrade your shit. This is also the first time we can get a use out of the sensor. This level, which is shrouded in complete darkness, and a level coming up in the next stage which is filled with steam, are meant to visually impair you, and your sensors are supposed to get you around it. Upgrading your sensor once clears the darkness, but it doesn't clear the steam in the next stage, meaning you have to upgrade it again if you want to be able to see. These visual impairments remind me a lot of the blooper ink in Mario Kart games. They're supposed to blind you or hinder you a bit to prevent you from making progress or doing well, but in actuality, they're really fucking pathetic. They really don't get in your way at all, actually. Like I said, you can play through both of these levels without actually having to have your sensors upgraded. I swear, there's no other level that does this, unless I missed some in my playthrough. But I've played through this game a bunch of times, and I figured I would have caught on to something like that. So if I were you, I wouldn't upgrade my sensors at all, and put those points into something more useful. If you're going to 100% the game, you're going to have to upgrade your sensors eventually anyway. And even if you aren't, there's enough characters to go around where you might be able to fill out all your upgrades without having to really look for characters too much. The level with the darkness isn't that elaborate. There's only one way to go, really, and once you get down, you can either go left or right. All you have to do is make sure you hit both dead ends, as they both have characters you can find. I guess I can kinda see the sensors being helpful in this first level with the darkness, because if you go right instead of left at the first fork in the road, you won't run into Rainbow Parakeet, and that means you miss out on an upgrade. However, Rainbow Parakeet is still required later on in the game, and at that point, you'll probably only have your sensors left to upgrade, so it's really not that big of a deal, even if you have to wait a little bit. At the end of this level is Pook, and it's another really interesting boss fight as he changes forms a bunch. He can change into a lion, a shark, an eagle, and a monkey. Each of these forms have different attacks. It keeps you on your toes, and you can't just blindly attack him, as he can change into any form after he cycles through them once. Okay, so now that we've beaten Pook, fuck, I forgot to talk about the story. Fortunately, it's around this part of the game where the story actually begins to take place. Before, the only really story-related thing was Atlas showing up after we beat Magnemite, telling us we needed to, believe in Darwinism and evolve and shit like that. So the whole reason we're on this island is because the police came to Astro asking if he can find out why these totally futuristic airplanes are melting over this spot in the Pacific Ocean. So we fly on over and find out that not only are these gangsters using this artificial sun to keep people away from this island, but they're also using it to dig deep into the island to find a treasure. But all they managed to find was this little robot boy named Pook, and they've essentially enslaved him to do whatever they want. That's why we ended up fighting him. After the fight, a bunch of police officers and a bunch of other fucking weirdos come by and arrest the gangsters. Now we're going to the goddamn moon to negotiate with kidnappers. On the moon is a big construction site, and the owner's son Daichi is being held hostage there. Also, wait, what the fuck? Did Dr. O'Shea just use light years to measure time? Isn't he like a genius scientist? He should know that light years are used to measure distance. What is he referencing, fucking Pokemon? As you probably expect from a level that takes place on the moon, the area has low gravity, making it so you jump extra high. I know I've been talking about finding characters and upgrading your gear a lot, but this will probably be one of the last times I talk about it. In my opinion, starting with this level, a problem emerges. Some of the characters you have to find to log into your Omega Factor can be really difficult to find. I'm bringing it up in this level because it has 2 instances of something like this. The first character, Jetter Mars, is hidden behind a destructible wall, up high where you need to have upgraded your jets enough to reach. The second character, Fu Moon, can only be found if you punch this spot in the room full of steam. There's no indicator that those characters are there, or that those spots are destructible in any way. In Metro City, you can break the glass on the buildings, and one of them even has a character behind it. I can give this a pass though, because beforehand at the beginning of the level, you fight robots in front of these glass panes, meaning that you have no choice but to punch them, showing that they are destructible. One way I think they could have solved this problem is by putting enemies nearby the places where these characters are hidden. They did this for Ambassador Magma, who is hidden behind a wall in the second level, on the elevator stage to be precise. He's hidden, but since there are so many enemies around that you have to fight, it's highly likely you're gonna break that wall anyway. Admittedly, this isn't like a huge problem or anything, but it's just something I think they could have thought more about. After navigating the level, we find Daichi at the end. But it's actually Atlas, and he's not here to talk about Persona. The format of this fight is a lot like the Artificial Sun, where you're flying around and using your laser as your main attack. One of the main differences here is that the area to fight in is a lot bigger. The cool thing about this fight with Atlas is that it's like fighting an alternate version of Astro. He has an arm cannon and a dash attack, reminiscent of Astro's own specials. In the second half of the fight, he gains an orbital that makes it so you have to keep your distance from him. At the end of the battle, Atlas gets really embarrassed about seeing a naked girl and runs away, and Ten was right, that was a really lame way to end the battle. I'd be really disappointed too if my multi-million-dollar creation malfunctioned after seeing some skin. The next stage is all about racism, so we're gonna skip it. But to be honest, we can't, because it actually has some important story beats we have to pay attention to. I've been talking a lot more about story than I initially hoped, so I'm just going to go over a few of the important points of this stage. Point 1. There's a bunch of robot racists who don't want this robot named Rag to be president of Antarctica. Point 2. There's a pro-robot rights politician named Duke Red who's in attendance for the inauguration. Point 3. Astro handles women better than Atlas. Point 4. Rag is assassinated by the robot racists. Lorenzo. He's already getting fucking assassinated. The president! Astro goes after and captures the leader of the robot racists, a guy named Lord Deadcross, except his name isn't actually Lord Deadcross. His actual identity is the original creator of Rag, a guy named Rock. And then the train they're all on goes back in time a couple 10,000 years. I wouldn't say these stages are special or anything. It mostly focuses on flying levels, and the boss at the end isn't much to write home about. Mostly, it's just a kind of okay stage. Alright, stage 6. We're almost done with the first half of the game. The whole reason we went back into the past is because this guy Shariku used his powers to take us there. Before he can attack us, Pook comes out of nowhere and saves our asses. And then this princess tells us to go and kill Shariku because he's trying to take over the world. The stage is completely on the ground, meaning there's no flying segments at all. Just going through each segment and wailing on these robots is so much fun without having to be interrupted by the flying segment. I also want to acknowledge the details they put into this stage. This stage is basically Cruciform Island in the past, and if you look in the background, you can see some of the similarities between the two stages, like the statue of Princess Sapphire and these broken down Easter Island head robots. I really appreciate these kinds of details in games. It's fun to notice these things on your own and start to put the puzzle pieces together in your head. And even though the story isn't like a huge JRPG kind of thing, it really does add more depth to it. Eventually, you'll come to the side of a pyramid with these boulders falling down it. Dodging them isn't hard, just as long as you get the timing down. What I want to know is what the hell this thing is hidden inside the pyramid. You have to essentially clip through the floor to get to it. If you punch it, it'll drop hearts, and if you let your guard down, it'll kinda like bitch slap you or something. It's just a neat little Easter egg I thought I'd point out. I'm actually surprised anyone was able to find this. Now we got this sick boss fight with Shariku. It's pretty challenging. He has a lot of moves at his disposal and can easily hit you if you get too close to him. He has this move where he throws his spear and makes copies of it, and depending on where you were when he threw them, they'll shoot in that direction. He'll also summon monsters to fight with him, making it so you have to pay attention to two different targets. Alright, Shariku runs away after we beat him. Astro figures out the secret to time travel after 3 months, and then we go back into the present where we find out we've actually been gone for 5 years. And in that time, 80% of the world has been destroyed in this civil war between robots and humans. This guy named Shadow has gathered the world's strongest robots and wants us to join him in order to defeat the last remaining humans. We decline and we start what is probably my favorite stage in the entire game. This stage is a boss rush, and it's a lot of fun. I'm not going to talk about it for too long, since describing each boss will take way too much time, so I'll just go over my favorite bits and we'll talk about Pluto at the end. The first boss is this guy named South who has multiple arms. You can't actually do damage to him unless one of his arms is out. Every single time I fight this guy for the first time in a playthrough, I can never remember that that's how you're supposed to deal damage to him, and I always get my ass kicked by his counter. Up next is Denku. He's kind of annoying. He'll turn invisible and make it so you can't hit him. The only way to be able to see him is to hit these generators to make him visible. He throws these bombs on the ground that have a slow countdown at first, but as you deal more damage to him, they'll get faster and faster. Meaning, as the battle goes on, things will become more hectic as you try and find Denku while also avoiding his bombs. Brontis is probably the most straightforward fight in this tower, as you can only hit his core when it's exposed. He's also pretty tanky, making him one of the longer fights in the boss rush. After Brontis is Epsilon. The whole battle takes place underwater, which means there's this low gravity thing going on, like on the moon. He uses sea creatures to attack you, which is a pretty creative idea. He'll also hit you with these laser beams, which are insane if you get hit by them. Level 5. Pluto. This fight is awesome. Getting too close to him causes him to do this tornado attack, which does incredible amounts of damage. This means you have to attack him while he's attacking. Because of this, you feel like you should hit him as much as possible, but get too cocky with your hits and he'll catch you with your pants down. This is a really great fight in my opinion. It really tests your mettle after your long journey. And by long journey I mean like 3 hours. But don't worry, there's more to come, because after you beat Pluto, Shariku summons Death Mask, which is this big robot god in space who deems all robots too dangerous and decides to kill them all at once, including Astro. So now, Astro's fucking dead! But wait, this magic chicken has come, and they're gonna give us a second chance. And then the game stretches out its balls and does something super risky. It pulls a ghosts and goblins, and now we have to start the entire game over. Now that might seem like a turnoff for anybody who wants to try this game out, but the game is short enough where this whole thing is pretty inoffensive to do again. Also, it's not exactly the same thing. Some of the story has changed and Astro's aware that he's gone back in time to do shit over again. Some of the enemies are tougher and the bosses have been made tougher as well. There's still characters to find and fill out into the Omega Factor, so it means you'll still be upgrading your weapons as you go. That's pretty much all there is to this New Game Plus kind of thing that's going on. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly finish up what's left of the story before we head on over to the final level. It's going to be brief, so don't expect a perfect reciting of the story or anything like that. First thing you need to know is about this guy named Councilman Drake. He thinks his daughter was killed by robots and wants all robots dead. He's also under the influence of Shariku. Over in Antarctica, the roles are reversed here, where Rock is the president and Rag is acting as this guy named Blue Knight. We meet up with Duke Red, who is hiding somewhere in Antarctica, and find out that his daughter Nuka is actually Death Mask. Drake is using all his political power somehow to find Death Mask up in the solar system somewhere and use it to destroy all robots in an act of revenge. In order to prevent this, we enlist the help of Dr. Blackjack and take him to the moon. That way, he could operate on Primrose and show Drake that his daughter is still alive and that she wasn't actually killed by robots. And that it was actually Atlas's fault that we're in this fucking mess, all because he was a simp. So Drake stands down and decides not to use Death Mask. And then Nuka, who is in Death Mask, decides she wants to thank us, but then reveals her location to Shariku, who begins to start an Armageddon against the world. So Astro flies his ass all the way to outer space to fight Shariku and defeat him one last time. So now we're starting stage 8. It starts off with a flying level, and then moves into a boss rush against Magnemite, the Artificial Sun, and Caribs. They're all the same fight from last time you fought them. One thing I should note, however, is Caribs. He does 50,000 damage to you if you touch his body. The strategy you want to use here is when the fight starts, fly all the way to the top of the screen, wait until he's right about to touch you, then fly all the way down and then underneath him. Then you can start hitting him with your attacks. All you need to do now is deal with Shariku, which is the exact same fight as last time. The only difference is that Death Mask is a part of this fight now. It'll shoot lasers down the center of the screen occasionally that you'll have to watch out for. Afterwards, in a last-ditch effort, Shariku summons this giant monster robot named Garen, using Pook to operate its heart. Garen is the final boss of the game. He's not extremely challenging, but he's absolutely no pushover either. You can only inflict damage on him when he exposes Pook. He's really tanky. A fully upgraded laser will only do 1 circle of damage to him. Refilling your super gauge is also challenging. Since Pook is suspended in mid-air and Astro moves when he hits a target, you'll only be able to get so many hits in. This is a battle of endurance and patience. Most of his attacks are easy to dodge, but if you trip up, you could easily get hit by them. Especially this rock attack, which can take up the entire screen if he wants. After defeating Garen, you get this little mini flying stage where you have to carry Nuka, or this thing that's supposed to be Nuka, past all of Garen's remains and into the sun. In my opinion, this is a little frustrating. For one, Astro's and Nuka's hitboxes are a little weird. Your goal here is to not die and not let Nuka get hit too much by this debris. But sometimes, when it looks like Astro's the one who's supposed to be getting hit by this debris, Nuka takes the damage instead, and vice versa. Some of the spaces you have to get through this debris are super small, and it's really up in the air whether or not you're going to get hit. When you do get hit, I highly recommend you use your invincibility to get through some of the upcoming debris, and then give yourself some elbow room. After getting through that, Astro dies again along with Nuka, and then is revived by the magic chicken, and then we get to see the credits. If you got every single character in your Omega Factor and wait for a few minutes at the end screen, you'll get a secret ending as a reward for all your hard work. I really consider this game to be a hidden gem on the Game Boy Advance. I don't really see a lot of people talking about it when the subject of old games is brought up, so I hope people decide to give this one a try. I guess the last thing I'll say is that I'm glad that this game has held up over the years. I did my best to make this video as unbiased as possible. I used to play this game all the time when I was a kid, and decided to pick it back up when I was in high school. Between that time period in high school and where I'm at right now, I've played this game through a couple more times, and I'm happy to say that this game has a lot of replayability. The gameplay has a lot to offer, so once again, if you haven't played this game, I highly recommend you check it out.